What's up, guys? Welcome in Mad Talk Sports episode 60. So it's going to be just me today, but I appreciate you all joining. And as you see already with the title slide up next to me today, Rags to Riches. And specifically, what it's going to be with Rags to Riches, honestly, it should have been Tags to Riches because of the franchise tag. That's what we're talking about a lot today because we're headed up on the free agency period for the NFL, and the offseason is really kicks off here. Like, obviously coaches have been hired and we've talked about a lot of them on here, but the tags is where the decision making gets real. So that's part of what we're going to talk about, though we do have general news in sports to talk about, so both basketball and football. That's why we got Doc on the cover too, because it's not just a football episode. We are in the thick of basketball season. However, since it's just me, we do have to talk some Packers. So that means we're going to have a little time where we go specifically into that. It'll be pretty relevant, but also some more Packer nerd type of topics to discuss as well. So without further ado, right away to get us kicked off here, we're going to do some half-baked takes. So this is something that I had debuted during the conference championship week, for where I would just take a quick little video, immediate thoughts, didn't have a lot of time to think about it. And that's why they're half baked. They're not completely done. They haven't been in the oven all that long. It's just seeing things you saw that you thought were interesting and you want to talk about. So besides a game, now this is going to be this week right now, specifically a couple of just general things that we've heard or that we've seen. So starting with the All-Star game, it's well documented that it's the All-Star circus right now. Like, it's not a game. It's not competitive. There's not a lot of effort put into it. It's just not good competition. So personally, I put it on in the second quarter. It's about halfway through the second quarter. One of those things you're not in a rush to put on anyways, because it hasn't been that good. It really just hasn't in recent years. So I did put it on because I at least wanted to check in, see Giannis, see Dame as a Bucks fan. And obviously Doc was coaching. And, you want to see the other stars that you don't watch a ton. But I watched about the last 5 minutes of the second quarter, and immediately it was obvious Dame was going to be the MVP because he was pulling up from wherever and sinking most of them too. So that was pretty obvious right from the jump, was that Dame was going to be the All-Star MVP. But the other thing was just, it was like an insult to watch that game. Like, I legitimately felt like that was a waste of my time. Like, it was bad, which usually in media, live sports is king ratings wise. So we see it with the Super Bowl, we see it with the NFL playoffs. Heck, we see it with just NBA games in general. Like, live sports are king in what drives views, because everything else you can circle back to podcasts or shows you're binging or movies that just came out or even movies that are in theaters still. Like, you can get to those when you get to those, but live sports, they're only special in that moment. So they get eyes on glass. And the All-Star game still does that, but for me, I turned it off. And I was like, I'm going to, right now, me and Fur, we're watching Andor, the Star Wars show. We're rewatching it because it's about a year ago since it came out, season 1. So that's where I put my attention, because the All-Star game just doesn't have the command that it used to have. I just really didn't enjoy watching it. Other stuff, I watched a little bit of the 3-point contest when I was out and about, same with the dunk contest, but not something where my eyes were on glass. Again, like, it was just background noise at that point. And lastly, the celebrity game was interesting. That was probably the most interesting part of that. That was another one of those things that I kind of caught here and there. Didn't sit down for the entire thing, but it was cool to see Micah Parsons out there. It was cool to see, Tristan Jass, even. He's from Kenosha. I'm from Kenosha. Met him, a couple times. I wouldn't claim to be a close friend of his or anything like that, but it was still cool to see someone represent K-Town, Wisconsin. So that was a fun game in general. And again, like, just the, seeing some of the NFL guys out there too, that was good. And the coaches, I think, make things better too in that game specifically. So all in all, that was probably the best part of the weekend. Someone who does deserve credit, that I'm not the biggest LeBron fanboy. No one would ever accuse me of that. I'm also no longer the biggest LeBron hater. And something I do really respect about this weekend is he did play. He did. He played. It was 14 minutes, so I don't want to. I think it was 14, but so, like, wasn't anything crazy. But I didn't realize he missed the game before, and now he's missing the game after because he does have an injury. And it's nothing crazy. I'm not going to make him a martyr, but playing through something, some level of at least discomfort. Be doing that when you're at this age, that's incredible, one, and just setting a precedent, setting an example for the rest of the guys in the league, because they should be following that same act. And Adam Silver made it clear he wanted the All-Star game to be real. He wanted it to be something people wanted to watch. And you could tell he was disappointed. And that's another thing people have been talking a lot about this week, is that he asked the players, like, hey, this is what I want, and this is what I need out of you guys. Like, I'm a big player coach, but you guys got to give a little bit. And it didn't happen. And that goes to the end of the game when he was like, well, here you go. Here's your trophy. Because 200 points is just absolutely insane. And it's unfortunate. It really is. But shout out to LeBron for at least going out there and giving it a run and helping out Adam Silver and just the league in general of trying to salvage the All-Star game, which used to be the best probably All-Star game in major sports. So unfortunate there, but it is what it is. Something similar that happened over the course of the All-Star break, not directly relating to it, but he was the coach and he is at the center of our picture. So Doc Rivers, he got called out by JJ Redick, who, if you recall, did play for Doc for the Clippers and had some of his best years there. But he called out Doc, basically saying there's always an excuse with that guy. Like that's basically what he said. And obviously that kind of went viral. Like everyone knew about it. Like Bulls fans at work were telling me about it. And my first reaction is like, maybe it is. Like, maybe that's true. He's obviously been in the locker room with him. And those were some good teams, not amazing teams, but good teams with Lob City that always at least underachieved. Like, no one was expecting them to win rings, but you were expecting them at least to get to the conference championship, or now I'm talking football, to get to the conference finals. And they never did that. And they had never done that until the Ty Lue era now. So it's very possible that that's the case. And a lot of people have been calling out JJ for calling out Doc, and Doc's JJ actually was a little wishy-washy about it. He was like kind of turning around on people, and he's like, oh, well, you guys will view all of that when there's a hot take, but you won't look at me grinding the film and giving you some detailed analysis of the game of basketball. I mean, I get it. I get what he's saying. Like, that's what our society is you want the fast news. You want what's, fun to talk about, but you don't want like the true analysis, because it's just not as exciting. Like, I get it. He's making a valid point there. And again, I can't really question if Doc has been out here making excuses. I know Bucks fans are not all happy about Doc at all. And I'm kind of forcing myself to believe. And I know one of the big things Doc's trying to do right now is make things simpler for the Bucks. And some Bucks fans might groan at that. Like, oh, we just had this problem with Bud, to where it was he had his fastball and nothing else, and he couldn't adjust. But a good point, a good comparison is the Nuggets last year. They were relatively simple. They knew what they did, and they did it well. And that's Jokic being that point center. That's Jamal Murray being the guy who can take over the offense at different times. It's running pick and roll between the two and having spot up shooters. Like, that works. And it was, if you have the right guys, like, just because the other team knows that's coming, like, you could still execute at a higher level to where there's just nothing you can do about that. How many times with the Nuggets did we see plays where your reaction was, there's just nothing you could do about that, specifically against the Lakers, really? But going back to the Doc side of things, like, I know that's been one of his big emphasis points. He's doing a little too many interviews with the media. I think his brief tenure within the media during his unemployment from a coaching standpoint to start this year went a little too far. So curious to see how things play out for the Bucks, but I do remain hopeful. Back to JJ, don't mind that he called him out. I think that's totally in bounds for the position that he's in. Another JJ, but this one a Watt, JJ Watt. So I think this was on the McAfee show, but the point he made, this was really in response to the Super Bowl where there were no holding calls. And his suggestion is that we make holding from a 10-yard penalty into a 5-yard penalty, which is interesting. And if you think about it, and his argument basically was a 10-yard penalty is devastating to a drive, right? You got first down, first down, first down. You're at midfield. You're feeling good. Boom, 1st and 20. You're behind the sticks. And when you're behind the sticks, that's a place you gotta crawl to get back from. So if you're not, even if you get a 6-yard run, you're sitting in 2nd and 14, and you're still in a rough spot. So holding calls can devastate what were otherwise great drives. And because of that, JJ argues refs are hesitant to throw it sometimes, especially in big games like Super Bowls. Like, you could really tell that trend is that they don't call a lot of holding. They let things go. And at the same time, any lineman will tell you, like Drake and Kyle, we talked about last week, every play you could call a hold. So if you make it 5 yards, maybe you can enforce it tighter, and that'll actually get that to be something that changes. I 100% agree with this plan. I am on board. JJ Watt is on the money here because it is devastating. Like 10 yards, that screws up your whole drive. And it's just like how on defense, roughing the quarterback, roughing the passer is 15 yards. Like, that devastates a potential stop. And because of that, they're enforcing it. They're showing, like, we don't want you to do this. So with holding, I think it could be done to the other side of things, or the other side of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is it's obvious the reason why you want to protect the quarterback, because that's what's driving your ratings more than any other position. So you want that to be a devastating penalty so that it doesn't happen, so that it just doesn't happen. This is the opposite. Like, on the holding side of things, you want it to be a lesser of a penalty so you can throw it more. And that way you can more tightly, not necessarily tightly officiate it, but you could eliminate an action that way by more frequency and swiftness and severity of the swiftness and the certainty that you'll get called for holding will drive holding down. While with the roughing the passer, it's the severity that will keep it down. Makes sense in my head. I hope that made sense on your side of things, but I think this is an excellent idea by JJ Watt, something that should be implemented immediately. I think it's perfect. So another half-baked take. I think this one might have happened before last week. We didn't spend any time on it, but Jimmy G is suspended 2 weeks. Nothing crazy. It's a performance enhancing. I want to say it's from a recovery standpoint, so it probably came from a doctor, but either way, it was not approved by the NFL and the standards that they have set. So regardless, he's suspended. And with that, the next likely action for Jimmy G is to be on the rag side of things and getting cut. Now, obviously, he's made a lot of money in his career, so he's not literally rags, but you know what I mean? Like, he would be out of a starting job. And the question around that has been, would that be the end of Jimmy G as a starting quarterback in the National Football League? So with that, maybe. There's a lot of quarterbacks that have gotten additional runs as long as they hang around long enough. Prime example is the comeback player of the year this year, and that's Joe Flacco. But even you look beyond that and you think about guys like Nick Foles, who stuck around in the league in a different type of capacity, even after like their big contract elsewhere kind of fell apart. You think about Nick Foles to the Jags and eventually getting a job with the Bears. That could happen with Jimmy G. And it really is going to depend on his side of things. Like, what type of game is he playing? Is he going to play the waiting game? Like, I'm going to wait for someone to get hurt so that I get a good job? Or is it, I'm going to go saddle up somewhere, stay relevant in the league, and always be a chip that people are keeping an eye out for when they actually need to break glass in case of emergency? So I don't think this is the end for him as a starter. As far as where, I do think it'll be dependent on potential injuries, to be honest, unless the Patriots strike out on everybody and they need to do what they had to as far as break glass in case of emergency. So I could see that. But the other part of the question is, so obviously Jimmy G has failed in Vegas. Injuries played a huge part in that, but he failed. And Brock Purdy has succeeded him in San Francisco and by most accounts has outplayed him from a numbers standpoint. He's gotten him to the same level. What were we going to remember Jimmy G's legacy as? That's a question. And I would be curious Drake's thoughts. I would imagine it's we're going to remember him as being trash, as being the weak link on an otherwise stacked Niners team, which is certainly possible. And I think a lot of people will remember him that way. But at the same time, I think you have to give some credit. Like like I've been giving Brock Purdy credit lately as far as someone's got to execute it, someone's got to do it. And Jimmy G, he did. Obviously in the playoffs he got carried in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, he was a decent NFL quarterback. And he was decent in New England in the small sample size that we saw as well. He was just a decent fragile quarterback that unfortunately could not stay healthy, and that's really, that was the biggest thing that cost him his job in San Francisco more so than performance, was that he just not always available and regularly unavailable. So Jimmy G, I do think will have some respect when you look back at him. You'll be like, man, remember Jimmy G? Yeah, that was pretty cool when he was good in the league. He was the highest paid player for a little bit of time. So that's the Jimmy G side of things. At least that's how I'll remember him. It's kind of a similar tier is like a Matt Hasselback, like made some playoffs and, wasn't awful. Went on a deep run or so but never was just like, a, a, amazing. Like he was pretty good. Similar type of categories. That's kind of what I'll remember him as. For the Broncos, Russell Wilson house is for sale in Denver. So that's interesting because obviously that was an expensive build, and it was big news at the time when he bought it. And it was like the over built it, maybe I don't even remember, but it was all the bathrooms. I remember being on a storyline, and like eventually after his first season when he struggled, it was always got more bathrooms than touchdowns, and it was a big thing. And last year, obviously, he was benched at the end of the year. If you don't dis if you don't remember that, he it was a little odd. They were just starting to swim upward and get towards the, contention area, and then decided to go with Stidham, which was just so weird. But that's what happened. And now everyone's just assuming Russ getting cut. And we've documented how that would be just a massive, massive cap hit. But it's Sean Payton in the Super Bowl week had an interview with Rich Eisen, and he basically said, you can't count Russ out of the equation just yet. I think that's coach speak because of the, if you strike out on everything else, like you got someone in the building who's capable of running an NFL offense. Like he wasn't bad by any means last year. Like his numbers were decent. Obviously, I know some all 22 film people in the media called out that there was a lot of meat on the bone with Russell Wilson. So that certainly could be the case to some degree, is that he's just the Sean Payton wants more. So I totally believe that they're in the market for someone else, but it is also the, coach speak, because you don't know what's going to happen. So you got to keep things okay in case it actually you do get stuck with them. So that's what I think on the Broncos front, but at least their team seems to have turned around in general. They have most of their assets as far as picks this year. They at least have a first rounder. So that's good for them. So that'll wrap up half-baked takes, and we will take a 2-minute break on my end of things. We'll be right back for you so that I can refill on water and then get into Tundra Talk. All right, welcome back. So now we are going to transition to Tundra Talk, and basically this is just taking a quick break here to talk about the Packers because, there is some news on that front, but I also am going to, again, like I said, to kick us off, I'm going to go into a little Packer nerd part of it for just a minute. This won't be the biggest segment of the day, but first off is David Bakhtiari, and basically on the rumor mill is that he is likely to be a cap casualty, meaning that he will be cut. So my thoughts right away. Sad that, it's sad that that's the way that it has to be, but it does have to be that way. So before I go into the David Bakhtiari part of it, we got to talk about money. We got to talk brass tacks. So his cap hit is $40 million for 2024. That's 19% of the cap. Shout out to Over the Cap for providing the cap numbers on that. And Packers can't get all of that back. But if they cut him like pre-June 1st, so basically before the start of the new league year, they would get $20 million in cap relief. They would get 20 million in savings, 20 million in dead money, about 50-50, or might bend a couple pennies one way or the other, but they would free up a lot of money. And that goes back to the Bakhtiari part of it. It's an unfortunate reality that this is what they need to do. And it's unfortunate because on the money part, to close out that, you're just giving away $20 million for someone to not play on your team. Just after last year, we gave away, I want to say, $40 million for Rodgers to not be on our team. So, yeah, you're throwing money into the trash. That's the money part. But it's obviously sad because David Bakhtiari's been an incredible piece in Green Bay for a decade, maybe even a decade and some change, because he's been around the block a couple of times with the Packers, and he had some great years. He really did. And that's part of the legacy side of things. Is as a player, there was about a 4 or 5 year stretch where I would argue with anybody that David Bakhtiari was the best pass rusher in football. The best. And it was hard to argue against because the numbers were all there. And he was at the top of the league because his get off at the snap was it was unmatched in the league in terms of the speed at which he got there. And he wasn't guessing. Tackles today are guessing. That's why you see them leaving early. Now, they're not guessing blind. They know the cadence. They know when to jump early and what they can get away with. That's why you see it all the time. But Bakhtiari, he had his nose to the grindstone, basically. Like, he was just, his neck was just had to have been so strong to like just get that and just pop right back. Like, those are little things that everyone's going to notice. What I meant by Packer nerd part of it. But that's what he did. And that's obviously what a lot of tackles had to do over the years. But Bakhtiari just seemed special at it at his peak. Like, it was really, really impressive to watch him shut down some of the best D linemen of the era and pass rushers of the era. So my heart goes out for Bakhtiari as a player and as the person and teammate that he's been in Green Bay. Like, I don't know if any teammates had anything bad to say about him. Obviously, Rodgers loved him. Obviously, the rest of the O linemen loved him as well. Like, he meant a lot to us as fans. As a Bakhtiari jersey, Agent 69 is forever a legend. He's, a family man. He loved Green Bay. Like, what more could you ask for out of a keystone player within your franchise? So that's that part of it. I will remember him fondly and have no ill will, because where should he go is the next question. And he's probably going to go to the Jets. It's just, it is what it is. Him and Rodgers are buddies, like I said, and Rodgers just loves recruiting the Packers right now. So it's going to happen. I'm okay with it. I've come to terms with it. I know a lot of Packers fans will hate it and will talk bad about it, about either of them, but I won't have it. Those guys are Packer legends. We got our guys. We're focused on the future. And with that goes into my wish list for me, for the Packers. And, well, it's from me, actually, for people on the Packers. So, first off, for our new defensive coordinator, Hafley, let's sign him a safety, because the Packers' safety room is, I'd say, the weak link on the defense for sure. If you're going to spend some of this cap space that you have, that's a good spot to do it, is at the safety position. And I would be okay if you went the draft route, but I'd like a veteran presence in that safety room. And if it means you bring back Savage, that's really going to depend on the market for me. But we need a safety. That regardless, we need to figure out who's going to be the best safety on the Packers for the next 3 years. For Jordan Love, a couple of rookie O-linemen. I'd like to see an O-lineman heavy draft for the Packers. Take like 3 of them, where you get a tackle and 2 interior guys in the 2nd, 4th, and 5th round, something like that. The Packers are known to do that, to where they're like, all right, well, we need a tight end this year. We're drafting 3. One of them's going to be good. We need a receiver this year. We're drafting 3. One of them's got to be good. O-linemen, same thing. They've done that, and it's worked. It's gotten them the likes of John Runyon or Sean Ryan, who came on at the end of the year, or MVS when he was he was a decent receiver for the Packers, obviously a Super Bowl champion as well. But the same would go for like an Aaron Jones and a Jamal Williams. Like, that's, the more shots you take, the more scratch offs you get, the more likely you are to hit. So I want them to do that on the O-line because the O-line got better as the year went on, but we need to be a force up there. For Matt LaFleur, a rookie running back. Unfortunately, I expect A.J. Dillon to be gone, which that's a sad one because of the off the field things as far as how he is. He loves the area too. And Packer country loves A.J. Dillon, even when he can be frustrating at times from on the field standpoint. But even on the field, he's had some special games. You always feel his impact later in the season. So that's Dillon likely is gone. So the Packers drafting a rookie running back to pair with Aaron Jones and be able to take off some of the workload and be in the stable for when Jones gets dinged up. Bless me. Hit a little Quinnen Williams there. All right. So that finishes up. One last thing. So this goes for all Packer fans. We want the Bears to screw up the number 1 pick. Okay. In all seriousness, I do root for the Packers and Bears to be able to have a competitive rivalry because it simply has not been that. They have not beaten us, the Green Bay Packers, since 2018. And I want to say from 2009 onward, they've beaten us like 4 times. So that's a long time. We play twice a year if you need reminding there. So in seriousness, I would like there to be some competition here. A really great opportunity for the Bears to turn their franchise around if they can get the quarterback right and land with their other top pick. I do think regardless, this season will be a little bit of a lame duck year because I think they have a lame duck head coach and they should have just made all these changes at once, but they decided not to. So I think they're still a year away, even if they get it right. But I'm really curious to see what their plan is because they are keeping the cards to the vest. Another thing within the week would have been the Justin Fields thing. I guess briefly to touch on that because we missed it in half-baked takes. I 100% expect them to take a quarterback. I don't think that's because I didn't come to that conclusion because of the Instagram thing. I think that added 1% reasoning as to why it could. But also, it just getting the sense from more and more Bear fans that he's outie, and that's okay. I think they could both be better off for it. Okay, and then our last segment here for today talked about the franchise tags to riches. We got tag them, bag them, or let them walk. So this is a return from last year. We did something similar, and basically last year I think it was tag them, bag them, or bye-bye. But this time it's let them walk. I think that was what it was originally supposed to be too. So I got about 10 to 12 guys to go through. And I did actually look over the cap space for these teams too on Over the Cap because so many times it's easy to be like, oh, guy's a dog, sign him, but you got to look at the business side of things. Not the average fan doesn't always take that into account. So something we will take into account here. And first up, Josh Allen. Not the quarterback, sorry. The outside linebacker for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's 26 years old. If you remember, he's had some incredible games for them. The Jaguars, though, have $11 million in cap space. It's getting tight. It is getting tight. And if you don't know, Calvin Ridley is also he's not even on the list. There's so many guys eligible. We're not hitting all of them, but Ridley's also a candidate for a tag. So Josh Allen, I would bag. I do think that's a quality outside linebacker. That is an important position in the NFL as someone who can pass rush for you. So I would bag him. I would get him if you could get him at a reasonable price. So if he wants to reset the market, no thank you. But if he's content being like the 5th highest paid or something within that position, then absolutely there's some wiggle room there and you can figure out the cap stuff on the back end. I'm sure you have other expiring contracts in the future as well. So that's the Josh Allen side of things. I'm a big fan of him as a player. I think he's, right on that cusp of the top 10 at that position. And I think he made the top 10 when we did that last year for like our positional rankings. So very curious to see how things go there. If you look at they do a valuation diamond on Over the Cap. So that's actually an interesting thing. If you went to like their website, which basically says like the player's performance in relation to like their cost, so that you get an idea of their general value in relation to the rest of the position, so or rest of the league in that position. So with this case, he ranks very well on that overall spectrum. Obviously he's been a little cheaper on a rookie deal, but someone I think you should bring back, as long as it all makes sense. So Carolina, Brian Burns, he's very similar. They might have been in the same draft, if I recall correctly. And the Panthers have a little over 26 million in cap space, so they got money to pay, to dish out if they want to. And same thought process. I think you need to lock up a Brian Burns, because that's one of those positions. I know the Panthers, in all likelihood, are not a year away from turning it around. They're not a move away. They're not an end away. He's obviously already on the team, but that is one of those guys you're going to want when you do actually make the turnaround. When you do actually like advance to where you want to be, then all of a sudden you're missing one of your premium positions, that being an edge rusher. And then you got to go out and get one. So you may as well lock up the one that you have now. I think he's a very good player, and it's someone similar in that like top 10, give or take, like 8, like 6 to 12 range, depending on who you ask. So someone worth keeping around. I very much would bag that one as well. So we got 2 bags, and we might see more. So the Patriots, Kyle Duggar, safety. And he's someone who's also kind of like in that similar type of range, as far as like anywhere from like the 10th to 12th, maybe 10 to 14. Like he's solid, or might be closer to 14 when you actually like list out names, but he's a solid player. I would say you tag him. Tag him because you kind of want a year to figure out where you are for the Patriots. Like they do have cap space, but they also need to figure out a quarterback. They need to figure out weapons, despite how much they spend on it. They need to figure out a line. Like they have so many holes that they're a team that like at least the Panthers have someone who they hope is the guy at quarterback. Like they don't know, but they hope. The Patriots don't even have that. So the Patriots, I think they kind of need to tag and then like hold their cards another round to see if they get a free one from the from the rest of the table, and then get to see another card from the dealer. So I think this is someone that you tag. The Bengals, T. Higgins. So they have good cap space right now, but Joe Burrow's contract is going to start kicking in. So take that into consideration here. And Jamar Chase is going to be coming up here soon too. And Joe Mixon is someone who might be a cap casualty. So a lot of mouths to feed on the Cincinnati Bengals roster. I think this is a tag and trade. So a little bit of a cheating here. Tag him, but send him somewhere and get some value for him, because there would be a market. There are a lot of teams that could use a T. Higgins. I think a team like the Lions could use a T. Higgins, though that would obviously be excess for them, but a type of all-in move that an aggressive franchise might make. Or you could see maybe like, for instance, the Buccaneers going for him if they lost Mike Evans to free agency. Someone we'll get to here too. Actually, no Mike Evans. We got too many Buccaneers to talk about later. So there's a market, and I don't even think those would be like the top options. I just go division by division: NFC North, NFC South, NFC East. Like that could be someone that maybe a team like the Commanders like to pair with a rookie quarterback, most likely. Like they might make that type of a move. Or you go to the NFC West, maybe a Arizona Cardinals makes that move because they do have extra resources thanks to that trade with Houston last year. So there's options. And I didn't even get to the AFC. There's options if you want to trade him. I think you can get a good haul. And I think the Bengals need to be thinking long game, because if you're trying to race for this 1 year, like, no. Like tap the brakes a little bit, play the long game. Joe Burrow's still 27 years old. Jamar Chase probably like 25, 26. And, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they're not going anywhere. Like it's a tough conference regardless. You need to play the long game. The NFL goes beyond 24 and 25. Great player, though. So in Vegas, they were hosting the Super Bowl, but this player was not there. Running back, Josh Jacobs. Here we are again with Josh Jacobs in the running back room being questioned and uncertain, up in the air as to where they're going to go. They're going to have money. What's going to happen to them? So the Raiders have no quarterback. We talked about Jimmy G earlier, likely to get cut. I don't think Aiden O'Connell's the guy at all. Brian Hoyer, you definitely know is not the guy. Are you going to make another move in free agency? I don't know. Are you going to draft somebody? They're in a tough spot at quarterback. So like their offense is going to live and die by Josh Jacobs, who he came on towards the end of the year. He had a bit of a rough start, but he really did come on towards the end. So I think this is a painful one, but you got to let him walk. And I precursed it with the fact that they have no quarterback, but also that you just can't tie up. You just can't tie up a 4-year contract to a running back when they're more in their mid to late 20s. You just can't do it. You can't do it, no matter how good. Not no matter how good they are. Like I like the move for a JT, for instance, for the Colts because they like their quarterback. They know their quarterback's cheap for 4 years, so they can pair an expensive running back for 4 years. So I like it for that, but I don't like it for the Raiders where you don't know if you got to go spend money on a quarterback yet. I let them all. Chicago, Jalen Johnson, and the Bears again have a lot of cap space, just like last year, despite the spending spree in free agency last year with Edmonds and Edwards and I want to say they brought in no lineman. I feel like I'm missing someone for them. But regardless, they made moves. And they can do it again this year. Jalen Johnson reportedly wants top dollar, wants to reset the market paid as the best cornerback in the league. And I've gotten mixed takes on this. Some Bears fans believe that he might not be the best, but he is lockdown and he's worth that money because lockdown corners don't grow on trees, which is true. And then some people, their thoughts are that he talks a bigger game than he plays. Like he's good, but he's 8th best in the league good, 8 to 10. Like, so that's still a top third, number one lockdown corner in the league. Like that's good. But there are people who would say like he's similar to that of a Snead leaving the Chiefs, or not leaving, but potentially leaving the Chiefs, in the fact that like there's a little bit more people in that tier. Like if you think he's at the top of the tier, sure, but there's very similar players in that regard that won't command that same figure. So there are mixed opinions on there. I think he does kind of fall somewhere in that general range between like being that top 10 guy and being more of like that 15 to 20 guy. If I wrote it all down today, probably be like 11, 12, something like that. So solid corner. It's painful as it's going to be for him. I tag him because, again, I feel like this is kind of a lame duck year for the Bears. So I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to just buy yourself some time and see what's the state of the team, because you don't know. Like you could be competitive this year. And if that's the case, you want that corner right now. But if you screw the pooch this season and you're, still deep in a rebuild next year, then yeah, you're not going to want to have invested a lot of money in him. So for the Bears, I think a tag is the appropriate approach at this point. So for the Ravens side of things, I know they have a couple guys and potentially being available for this, but I'm just going to summarize it with the fact that they have $5 million in cap space, and I think they should just let everybody walk. Just let them walk. Let them go. You draft as good as anybody in the league, especially defense, which I know they're some of their defensive line is potentially going to have to walk. But I think for the Ravens, it's just let everybody walk. Like you invest a lot of money into Lamar Jackson. You should let OBJ walk unless he's coming back on a veteran minimum because he got away with robbery with you guys. And, keep building through the draft. You guys are great at it. Tampa Bay, we got 2 to talk about for them. It could be 3, if you argue with Mike Evans. I don't know if he's eligible for the tag. I would assume so. But we got quarterback Baker Mayfield to start us off. Man, this is a hard one. This is really hard. He's on the cover. And he's someone who could embody the title itself as far as rags to riches. Again, not literally, but in terms of the, on the scale of NFL, especially NFL quarterbacks, because he took basically a minimum deal. He took like 1 year, 4 million for this season with the Buccaneers, where he had to fight for the starting job with Kyle Trask, and he did a great job. Went to the playoffs and won a playoff game. Like that's good stuff for Baker. So I know he wants quote unquote market value. Now, it really depends. What does he think he's valued at? Does he see himself as I'm a reset the market type guy, or does he see himself as a Derek Carr deal last year where it's like 3 years, $90 million total, like 30 million per year? Does he see himself on that Daniel Jones tier where it's like, well, we know he's better than Daniel Jones, like that type of contract as far as like 45 million a year. So for the Bucks, I think it depends on that very question. If he needs to be making 45 million or more, I need to buy time. I really do. I wouldn't be confident locking him into a 4-year, $200 million deal. Like, I just wouldn't feel confident in it. Not yet. And obviously, you would pay for it if you tagged him this year and he played well. And all of a sudden, next year, that tap comes due and you're paying him 5 years, $280 million. Like, that may very well happen. But I would rather be right than first. I'd rather be right about what I'm investing in than getting it early, at least when it comes to that size of one. Now, on the Packers side of things, I have the exact opposite mindset because I do think now Jordan Love's not up for tag, but my thoughts would be he's your guy. Lock him up right now because next year it's gonna break the bank. But for Baker, I don't think you quite know yet. Like you're hopeful, and you have more reason than not to believe he is. But man, that's a bold move to make there. Now, the other side of the field for the Buccaneers is an all-pro, and that's Antoine Winfield Jr., who is a absolute beast and a Super Bowl champion. And again, all-pro, not a Pro Bowler, but all-pro. And I'm a big fan of his game. I liked him right from his rookie season, and obviously went to Minnesota, so Big Ten guy, which is something I kind of like. Being a Wisconsin fan, though I've not been as attentive of a fan as I have been in the past, but still respect to the Big Ten boys. And I have in Madden franchises from time to time too. So overall, big fan of Antoine. And I think he's someone you bag because he's a top 5 safety in this league when there's not a lot of great safeties. There really just isn't. You would want to lock him up long term. Like, you could argue he had the best season of any safety in the league. Obviously, he was all pro. So he's up there. I think he's definitely top 5. And with that, you want to lock that down as long as you can for the right price, obviously. But they should lock that down and keep that defense having those pieces. The Dolphins, another defensive side here with Christian Wilkins, he's 29 years old. He's a beast interior lineman. The Dolphins do have cap space, which is weird when you consider the investment that they have in Tyreek, for instance, or Jalen Ramsey even. But then you think about their other guys. Waddle still on a rookie deal, Tua rookie deal, Raheem Mostert, cheap running back, Achane rookie deal, Holland rookie deal, I want to say still a young man there. So they haven't had to dish out too many big contracts. I think this is someone he's the level of player you would pay from a skill set standpoint. He's not Chris Jones, but he's a couple notches below. So I do think a defensive tackle is a very important position that is underrated by a lot of non-football people. It is worth paying him, but you have to also think about what's the rest of your money going to have to go to? Are you paying Tua? Because if you are, then you probably can't do both. But if you're not paying Tua, then absolutely you can pay Wilkins. So I think that's a complex discussion there. Otherwise, they may tag him for one more year out of them and see where they are with Tua after that. So that's still an option too. So I guess that would be the appropriate way to go. On the offensive side of the ball for the Indianapolis Colts, Michael Pittman. who had a sneaky good year last year. I want to say like 100 something catches, over 1,000 yards. He did really well in fantasy. He was just a moneymaker, just consistent. So he had a really good year with Gardner Minshew. I wonder how that will translate with Anthony Richardson next year. But for Pittman, I think you have to tag him because he's had a couple of nice seasons, but he's had some stretches where it was like, man, he's just a non-factor. I need to see another year out of him before I'm willing to pay him top receiver money. You could get him at a discount, then by all means. But if you don't, you got to be confident that he's like your number one, because otherwise you can go draft. You could go draft another Michael Pittman, in my opinion. I like him as a player. I don't love him as a player. I think he's a pretty good to good receiver. So I'd be curious to see what they do with them. Personally, I would tag them. Now, the Chiefs part of it, they have a tough decision between Chris Jones and Snead specifically. Like, I think those are the hardest ones, and they can't keep them both. They can't. So for them, it's which one do you want? You're going to have to pay McDuffie already when he's up. You know that. And Chris Jones is an all-time player in general, but even more so in these big games like the Super Bowl, which we've seen. So which is it going to be? And man, it's tough. I think I'd go Chris Jones just because of how great he is. And again, I just talk about how important defensive tackles are, but also lockdown corners don't come around every day. Now, at least you would be able to take solace in the fact that you have one other one and you have a deep well of defensive backs in general and a good track record recently of drafting and developing to a good point. So you could totally still go that route. As I talk through it, you keep Chris Jones. There's a certain level of special there that you may never be able to replace again. Both really good players, though. So you got to keep at least one of them around, and hopefully you can lock them up long term. It would be great. Chris Jones, obviously he wants to be there, and I'm sure they want him there. It's the financials part of it and figuring that out. So for their sake, I hope that does work out. So a lot of people that are up for the franchise tag this year, which it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, as it always is. But that is a wrap on episode 60 for Mad Talk today. So pretty quick action here today, and just the solo pod. So as always, I appreciate everyone for joining in, and Drake will be back next week when we come at you for episode 61. Shout out to Sleeper. Hit my hockey parlay yesterday. First hockey parlay I've ever done. Haven't watched hockey in a long time. So good way to get back into the sports groove as we continue NBA action. But thanks as always for listening in. Make sure to give us a like and then follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram, all at Mad Talk Sports. Didn't have Drake to count it off here today, but that's a wrap, and we'll see you next time.